Now, how many of you are looking at, planning, and strategizing about a food plot this year? It's a fun process. I love doing it. I love food plots. Been planning food plots since 1995. They're a big part of everything I do for my career, my profession, and my enjoyment of hunting and hunting whitetails, developing herds. Food plots are a basis for all of that, and they are a lot of fun. But there's a lot of steps that I think that you need to go through and that I've found and I've experienced many times over, 100 times over, hundreds of times, that you need to follow to make sure that you create an outstanding food plot and that you're covering all your bases. The first and most important step that I found, and outside of this, there's not a real order to everything, but your food plot has to be hidden. I hear so many horror stories about people spending thousands of dollars for a food plot. They located in the wrong spot. Now they walk through that food plot, or they have to position themselves to walk through it every time they go on the property. They create a nocturnal herd, and because of that food plot, their hunting is actually worse off the next year. And I have many, many examples of this. My YouTube channel, a lot of comments on this all the time. But if your food plot is not hidden from your access, from the neighbors, from view, then it's a poor choice for a location, and it really starts. A lot of times when I'm looking at client parcels, the first thing we do is hammer out where the food plot's gonna go and why. Once you have the food plots located appropriately, then you can take those food plots and you can actually say that this is where bedding should go, this is where travel corridors should go, this is where tree stands should go. Once you define that movement, then you can actually access your land to determine where you need to access to hunt. So number one, that food plot has to be hidden. Now number two, this is really important too. All these are very important. Number two, what I see a lot on properties is that debris in wooded settings is pushed to the side and you create a horse arena around that food plot with the thought that you can make this opening over here for deer and this opening over here for deer, and the deer will just go right through exactly where you need them to be. Folks, piling berms and debris around your food plots is a bad move anywhere you're at. Doesn't matter if it's up north in big woods, down in southwest Wisconsin, ag land where we're at, southern Michigan, northern Ohio where there's hardly any cover. Creating berms and debris around your food plot is a very bad idea. On paper, it sounds like a good strategy. And I know there's people out there that recommend doing that. And I ask you to look at them. How many mature bucks do they shoot on their property? How many mature bucks do they shoot on those food plots every year? Folks, I've had so many examples of mature bucks walking around those food plot setups. Does and fawns, young bucks going on there. They get used to it, especially when you get into the predator areas. Mature bucks will avoid those berms like the plague. Not to say there's not an exception to that, but what I found is the vast majority, the super majority of the time, it's a very bad move. It's a bad practice to get into. So instead, what I encourage you to do, and it takes a little bit extra step, and I've been doing this since the late 90s, encouraging people to do this, early 2000s, and I've done this for myself, my own plots in the UP. But you take the debris that you're clearing your food plots with and you push them back 30, 40, 50 feet off of your food plot edge, and then you leave a nice clean food plot edge, a soft edge. You can have rubs and scrapes around that entire food plot. So on a 1 acre plot, you might have 6 piles, you might have 10 piles, but they're all 30, 40, 50 feet off the edge of the food plot in a pile that blends into the habitat. It typically just becomes part of the habitat, part of the woods. The deer don't have any idea it's even there, and you have that nice, clean, soft edge all the way around your food plot that's inviting for whitetails. Now, it's not to say in a non-predator area that you put some switchgrass around that to screen it. You have some hinge cuts here or there, but you have that nice, clean edge. Think about it if you took a non-hunter out to there that's not used to seeing food plots, and they look at this beautiful food plot. It's completely green. It's against the backdrop of the fall foliage and the colors. They would say, and anybody else would say, this is beautiful. Contrast that to taking someone out to that food plot with a big debris of garbage and stumps and logs and piles all the way around that food plot. It looks ugly. It looks very invasive to bucks and mature bucks. To me, it sticks out. It's ugly. Deer don't like it. I mean, we find mature bucks don't like the box of a camera, let alone the box of a blind, let alone all these piles and garbage. It's not natural to them. when they come into that edge of the food plot. So I encourage you to create that clean edge. And it's something I noticed a long time ago, and this is part of it when I was clearing food plots in the late 90s up in the UP, is I'd have brassica that was 18 to 20 inches tall in the end of October, right against those big berms and garbage and logs. And then you go out to the middle of the food plot and it's down to the dirt. The reason was because those deer did not want to stand by that pile and feed in an area where there's predators. No different, they didn't want to stand to areas of conifer right down to the ground where they couldn't see in or out. And in those predator areas, you have to think about that. But even in the northern Ohio, southern Michigan areas where you don't have predators that are chomping on deer all the time and want to chomp on deer all the time and are waiting to, it still is ugly, messy, and it'll push deer away. Again, clean plots. I'll move on to point number 3, but I encourage you strongly to avoid that, avoid any advice that tells you to do something otherwise, and really take it from a lot of experience. It's not a good idea. Number 3, you have to take a soil test. I learned this many years ago. Of course, the first food plots, someone said to take a soil test. I didn't know what they were talking about. This is back in the mid-90s. It doesn't take a lot of soil. I find that creating a hole about 6 inches deep, making sure you don't have any organic matter in there, you're just shaving the side of that food plot with a little teeny sliver of soil. That sliver of soil might be an inch wide and 1/8 of an inch thick, 1/4 inch thick, and you're just putting a few of those slivers into a small amount about this big into a paper bag. I used to take them to the Elder County Soil Extension Office up in the MSU Extension Office in Elder County up in northern Michigan. When I used to live up there, they'd send it to Lansing, get the test. You just need a very small, they're sending in a small little paper bag. You need about this much. Can't tell me how many stories. Jim Islip up there, he was the county extension agent. He would talk about people bringing in a bucket of soil tests. You don't need that much. You're only working on that top layer of soil. So I encourage you just to take that top 3 or 4 inches, a sliver, put a few together from one plot and go from there. Now point number 4 with creating a great food plot is you have to have enough sunlight into it. I go to a lot of food plots where you look up to that southerly sky and there's just too much canopy and you're not going to get great growth. In some forages like brassica, they're not even going to grow at all. And so you have to have enough sunlight. What I encourage you to do is you can have slivers of sunlight here and there, but those food plots need about 7, 8, 9 hours of sunlight a day, and during the summer growing season, that's about a 90-degree window. So if you just hold up your arms like this, that 90 degrees, you can estimate 45 here, 45 here, 30, 30, 30, whatever it is. Estimate about 90 degrees of sunlight just towards the southern sky, the southerly sky, and that's going to be enough for those food plots for full sun. It doesn't matter if it's a piece here and there, which is often the case when you have some nice big mature hardwoods on the south side that you don't want to cut down. You're just cutting holes, making sure that you can get that southerly exposure. And north-south running food plots usually get the most amount of sun because they get that high sunlight during the day. East-west is really hard and shaded. So really make sure you pay attention to that southerly sky and exactly how much sunlight you're getting. Now, point number 5, try never to have that thought where I'm going to plant my entire trail system and I'm going to grow rye on that trail system or clover, whatever it might be, and that's going to add more food value. And that's going to be a good practice to do to accumulate your food plot acres. It never is, or rarely is. And there's several reasons why. For one, if you're planting food on your trails that you have to access on to get to stand, you're only inviting deer to your access and then you're spooking them off, so you're creating a nocturnal herd. Never a good idea in that case. Another thing, let's say you have trails crisscrossing through your property, you plant clover, you plant something green, a high quality forage, and then you have your food plots towards the outside or towards the inside, wherever they're at, to set up that hunting movement every single afternoon. Why do the deer have to leave their bedding areas if they have a trail that's planted right next to them that they can feed on and they don't have to move to that food plot to expose themselves every day to your hunting efforts? It sounds good on paper. We can increase the acres, we can do this, but what I find is a lot of those recommendations are not mature buck hunting based. They're just biologically based, they're forestry based. They don't have anything to do with actually how you can create a herd, create a quality herd, create deer movement, create a good hunting movement. Don't plant those trails. They're rarely a good idea, and you're setting yourself up for failure before you even begin. Now, once you have your food plots hidden, you're going to take care of the soil, and you're making sure it gets enough sunlight, you're not planting your trails, you say this is a great location, you have to take care of your weeds. And it doesn't matter if you're chemically controlling and you have a good chemical control plan. We've talked about that on many of my YouTube videos and my best food plot mixes every year, how to plant those, or you're continually disking throughout the summertime to limit weeds, to bring up weed seeds, to allow them to germinate, to disc them back in again and repeat 2 or 3 times, 4 times. You either have to do that or use chemicals, but I've seen too many food plots that are 10 acres and they're full of weeds, 60% weeds, 70% weeds. In that case, that landowner would have been a lot further ahead in time, resources, money spent by creating 3 acres, chemically controlling, and then putting the rest in habitat and putting the rest in bedding area and screening, whatever it might be. But on small parcels, we can't afford to have inefficiency with small acreage parcels and the amount of food that we can ultimately put on those parcels. So I encourage you to take care of the weeds. And if you have 4 acres and plots, if you have 2 acres and plots, that you're actually netting 2 acres or 4 acres and plots on those because you're taking care of the weeds. Now 7, when it comes time to planting, using annuals, and I encourage you to use fall annuals, cool season annuals. And if you are planting during the summer, if that's a necessity, then using annuals at that time too. But with annuals, you can always get more volume per month in that short period of time. Whether you're talking peas, rye, oats, brassicas, late planted beans, whatever it might be, brassicas including rape, radish, turnips, you can always get more volume in an annual than you can with a perennial. Now perennials sound good on paper. We're going to plant clover, we're going to mow it, we're going to maintain it. You're going to get a good amount of tonnage, but it's going to be spread over many, many months. And so by the time you get into October, November, that tonnage is fading and you're not actually influencing your deer herd. Now, number 8, summer plantings. A lot of people, dead of winter right now, we can't wait to plant during the summer, coming up in the spring, get those forages going. Summer planting should be your last planting that you think of. The priority is during hunting season. Deer herds are not made during the summertime at all. Deer herds are made during the fall. They're made during October, November, and December in almost every state. That's when you have the opportunity to influence a herd. That's when you have the ability to attract, to hold, to protect, to advance deer in the next age class, and of course hunt. But hunting is almost the last priority. If you're not protecting them, if you're not attracting them in the first place, if you can't manipulate those herd numbers, the sex ratios, improve the buck age structure, then you're not going to have a hunt. So everyone thinks, well, you're planting in the fall, it's all about the hunt. Absolutely not. It's all about creating a quality herd that you can then hunt. And that's not going to be built during the summertime. Summertime can actually have some diminishing values too. If you are creating outstanding whitetail habitat and includes high stem count, fall and winter cover, if you're creating great browse, great hardwood regeneration, woody shrub tips, briars, weeds, grasses, that perfect diversity blend of habitat that attracts deer in general during the fall and winter, then if you add summer food plots to that mix, you are creating a doe factory. Does and fawns that are here today, they're here to stay. They stay the entire year. They need high stem count, cover, weeds, grasses, brush, hardwood regeneration for fawning cover. You add that summer food to them, you create an explosion of does and doe family. I've been talking about this and recommending this for years. The first step in reducing doe numbers is not trigger control and using the trigger, it's eliminating summer food sources. Let those does and fawns feed out on your neighbors. Let them be exposed to more hunting pressure than just piling them on your land because you have great habitat and they put up with a lot of hunting pressure. Eliminate the summer food, reduce the summer food, and you'll eliminate doe concerns. And a lot of times hunters are worried about numbers and then they're planting 20 acres of summer plots with lots of switchgrass and native grasses and great fawning cover and great fall winter habitat, and you're really behind on using those doe permits and trying to shoot enough does if you have that summer food. Now on the flip side, if you're in a big wilderness area, you're in a hardwood setting, down central Kentucky, wherever it might be, UP of Michigan, northern Minnesota, northern New York, Pennsylvania, big wooded areas that have low deer numbers, then using summer food is a great idea to establish the pattern of use and establish your property as being the property that has food in the area, and you can build that deer herd. That's what I did in the UP of Michigan. At one time I'd have 8 acres of clover planted out of 8 acres of plots, 14 plots total during their first few years. Once my deer herd was built up to the numbers it needed to be, then I eliminated that food source down to 1 acre out of 8 towards after 10 years. And that was a great philosophy and great strategy because I was able to build the numbers, and then I was able to maintain those numbers. I still had to mow that clover 3 times a year because there's so much food during the summertime that there's 5 times more food than the deer need, literally 5 times more food than the deer need during the summertime. So a lot of times you're not really helping those. I see too much of a priority on summer food so that there's actually a lean period of time during the hunting season. And if you're putting summer food plots in at the expense of your fall plots and your fall ability to attract, then you're really not helping the deer herd much. A saying I like is, they'll say dead bucks don't grow. Well, a saying I like to add to that is healthy dead bucks don't grow either. So even if you added 5-10 pounds on that buck and a couple inches, and the same with the rest of the deer herd, the does, fawns, young bucks during the summertime, only to let them be exposed to hunting pressure because you're not taking care of them in the fall and the winter, then what good are you doing with those food plots? Now, number 9, when it comes to creating great food plots, I can't urge this enough that your food plots need to match within the lay of the land. There's no perfect shape that you need to apply. Unfortunately, people will say, well, I have to put this boomerang shaped plot, or I have to put this figure 8 size plot on my land. Well, it might be that that's the case, and it might be that that fits within the lay of the land, within the hills, within where you need those deer to travel and flow from that food plot to bedding areas, to another food plot, to a travel corridor, to a water hole that's located 50 to 100 yards off your food plot. I encourage you never to put a water hole on a food plot, or very rarely. Make sure that you forget about shapes when it comes to food plots. I have an article out there, if you just Google it, it's called Best Shapes for Food Plots. And I encourage you strongly to follow the lay of the land. I love long linear plots. You can see the plots behind me. I actually have 4 plots back up in this valley system. I have no room for linear plots. I can't put them on there. The property that I hunt on about a half mile, 3/4 mile away from here, again, I have no room. I can't, because of the lay of the land, I can't put linear food plots on. So I love linear plots. They're my favorite because you can bed does and doe family groups in a linear fashion along a huge length of plot, which pulls doe bedding out of the woods, puts them in a flat bedding area 30, 40, 50 yards apart in a linear fashion. That way you can free up acres and bedding acre in the middle of the woods. But bottom line is, that's my favorite. Even on my own parcels, I can't put those linear food plot fashions on a property I'm looking at to purchase right now. I can, and you can bet I will. But forget about a certain shape as it relates. Make sure you follow the lay of the land. That'll always be the best, and that's the way the deer move through those plots effectively. Then you can hunt them, hold them, attract them, match them with all your other improvements. In number 10, you have to position those food plots so that you're not spooking deer. Now, obviously that food plot has to be hidden, and we talk about that. Sometimes hidden food plots, like the ones behind me in the valley here, are perfectly hidden and they're in the right spot, but they might not be in the perfect position for a deer blind in a certain area, even though it's hidden, to access that deer blind and get in and out without spooking deer. We have a mountain bike course that I'm standing in right here that's been created the last 2 gun seasons, the entire gun season. So our gun seasons were effectively ruined on this plot, or in this valley system, for that redneck. The redneck up there we did okay from, but we're moving that redneck to another position. We're still going to leave that food plot in a hidden location, but we have that food plot actually positioned well. We have it positioned well where we can access around it. We can get into a blind, but the current blind location is not the best because of its proximity to this mountain bike course. And you can bet that we're gonna, although the food plot's located well, the blind's not, we're gonna move that. Your food plots have to be, I have to stress this importantly on almost every video, they have to be located so that you're not spooking deer every time you access the land, every time you hunt the land. So not only should they be hidden, but they should be located so that you can actually hide your blinds and hunt them as well. That is probably the most important, and it's similar to number 1, number 10, hidden food plots located well. I run into so many food plots every season on so many lands that we have to redo into switchgrass, redo into some type of bedding habitat because it's just not an appropriate spot. And it might be that you can get to that food plot safely, but then once you're there, you have to blow your scent into the food plot or into a bedding area. It might be that on your way there, you spook every deer off your land to get to it, and sure, it's safe once you get to the food plot, but you just destroyed your parcel to get there. So think about where it's located. Think about those top 10 tips for creating a food plot this year. I want to make sure you have successful food plots. There's more to it than just saying, grab your soil map, look at your best soil, and pick a spot. That was actually recommendations that I saw on TV years ago, and that is the poorest recommendation you have for a food plot. A food plot is not a great food plot, even if it grows really well, if it's in the wrong location. Encourage you, you can grow food anywhere. I was told on my UP property that I couldn't grow food plots in the sand that I did. The pH was too low, and then, you know, a year later, the soil's going up from 5.1 to 6.4, adding 4 tons of lime. They're in the right locations. I was able to hold deer on the property, grow a deer herd. So think about these 10 steps. Make sure you follow them for putting your food plot. I want to hear about it. I encourage you, if you like these kind of strategies and these advanced whitetail strategies, to make sure you subscribe to my channel. I really appreciate you watching. I appreciate your comments. I try to answer all the comments if I can. This is an important topic, and I hope you have beautiful food plots this season in the right spots that are weed-free, that complement your property, that flow with the land, and enjoy, because food plots are probably the most powerful attraction that you can add to your whitetail habitat for your herd and hunting efforts this season.